Vice Mayor, staff is ready when you are.
All right, thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and get started. The mayor will join us in just a few moments. Madam Clerk, you want to call the roll and establish a quorum?
Thank you. Vice Mayor Ashby,
Here.
Councilmember Laloe is expected momentarily. Councilmember Harris,
Here.
Councilmember Valenzuela,
Here.
Councilmember Chenier,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Guerra is expected momentarily. Councilmember Jennings,
Here.
Councilmember Vang,
Here.
Councilmember Laloe,
Here.
and Mayor Steinberg is expected momentarily. You have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Madam Clerk. I have no idea whose turn it is. So Councilmember Valenzuela, would you do the land dedication and Pledge of Allegiance for us?
Sure, it would be my pleasure, Vice Mayor.
Great.
Please
Thank you.
rise for the opening acknowledgement in honor of Sacramento's indigenous people and tribal lands. To the original people of this land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin Wintun peoples, and the people of the Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the Native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands by choosing to gather today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous people's history, contributions, and lives. Thank you. And now please salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right. Sorry to put you on the spot. I know that's a challenge. Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I don't see any presentation items. Am I missing anything, or can we go straight into consent?
You are correct. We go straight to consent.
All right, very good. This first item, I'm sure Councilmember Valenzuela has something to say, and possibly Councilmember Harris as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to move consent.
All right.
I'll second, Madam Clerk. Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay, that sounds great. Mayor Pro Tem, is there we don't need a staff presentation because it's on for consent, so moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. And for the record, I have no members of the public to make comments on this item. Vice Mayor Ashby,
Yes.
Councilmember Laloe,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Councilmember Valenzuela,
Yes.
Councilmember Chenier,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Guerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Jennings,
Yes.
Councilmember Vang,
Yes.
and Mayor Steinberg is absent. And the consent calendar passes.
Perfect. The mayor will be with us in just a moment. All right, we have two public hearing items. Let's move on to those. Madam Clerk, the first one, Stockton Boulevard.
Christine Weicker is going to give a brief presentation on 4995 Stockton Boulevard.
Good afternoon, Christine Weickert. Staff's requesting approval of a Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, or TEFRA, hearing related to the construction and financing of the 4995 Stockton Boulevard project. In May 2021, Council approved $15 million loan commitment comprised of $10 million in general and Measure U funds and $5 million in SHRA Housing Trust Fund and Mixed Income Housing Funds to Mercy Housing for the construction of the affordable housing project. The project is a workforce development on 7.7 acres with 200 units, which include 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Affordable restrictions are 30 to 70% of area median income. Mercy will be the developer, property manager, and resident service provider. In addition to SHRA's loan, other financing will include 4% low-income housing tax credits, state tax credits, tax-exempt bonds, deferred developer fee, and a general partner contribution. With the approval of TEFRA hearing today, construction is anticipated to begin in June, and staff's available to answer any questions you may have.
As always, putting it together for us. Thank you so much. I'm sure that Mayor Pro Tem Guerra has something to say about this project. I know it's very important to him.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I want to thank everyone involved from SHRA, Mercy Housing, community members. This is another exciting step forward to bringing forward 200 units of affordable workforce housing in the area. And with that, bringing more livelihood to Stockton Boulevard and improving that area. So I will open and close the public hearing and move the item.
Fantastic. Councilmember Chenier, I know you care deeply about this. Do you want to second his motion?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion and looking forward to this being a catalyst for many more projects on Stockton Boulevard.
All right, good work, you two. Madam Clerk, do we have any people signed up to speak?
I have no members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
All right, then we have a motion and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Thank you. Vice Mayor Ashby,
Yes.
Councilmember Laloe,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Councilmember Valenzuela,
Yes.
Councilmember Chenier,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Guerra,
Very excited to say aye.
Councilmember Jennings,
I join in the excitement. Yes.
Councilmember Vang,
Yes.
and Mayor Steinberg is absent. The motion
All right.
passes.
Thank you to Great, thank you. Thank you to the team at SHRA, Ms. Dozier. That's great work. Really important. We appreciate you. Ms. Weichert, do you have item number 3 as well, the Wong Center?
No, we have Ann Nichols
Okay,
here that's
great.
going to do the presentation for the Wong Center.
Perfect, thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor and council members. Ann Nichols, Management Analyst with SHRA. Staff is requesting a Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, or TEFRA, public hearing related to the construction and financing of the Wong Center project, and approval of the final tax-exempt bond documents, and amendment to the loan commitment with the developer Mutual Housing California. The project is a 150-unit new construction affordable housing development for seniors age 55 or better, located within the rail yard specific plan in downtown Sacramento. Mutual Housing will provide property management and 20 hours of on-site resident services. Pursuant to the Mixed Income Housing Ordinance, SHRA and the developer will enter into a mixed income housing regulatory agreement for the project. In April and May of 2021, the City Council and Housing Authority Board approved the bond issuance and a $3.5 million loan commitment. The developer originally targeted 50% of area median income, or AMI, and was not awarded tax credits and tax-exempt bonds. The developer then targeted some units at lower income and rent limits, 40% of AMI, in order to be more competitive in the tax credits and tax-exempt bond application. Given the reduced rents at 40% AMI yields a lesser than anticipated net operating income, the Housing Authority must amend the loan repayment terms from annual repayments to residual receipts. The TEFRA expired on April 20th, 2022, and the closing of the project financing is anticipated within the next few weeks. Therefore, staff is recommending adoption of the RETEFRA resolution and approval of the final tax-exempt mortgage revenue bond documents and the First Amendment to the loan commitment for this project. Staff is available to address any questions you may have.
All right, very good. Councilmember Harris, I like the way she says 55 or better. That makes me feel happy. I see you have your hand up. Would you like to comment? There is a member of the public also like to speak, but if you'd like to go first, you're welcome to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Are you happy for me considering my age?
Listen, the closer I get to 50, the happier I am about people, saying 55 or better.
You know full well I have you eclipsed in that department. So, this is a good project and it's been part of the rail yards proposal for a long time. I'm pleased that the city put in the $3.5 million. It was, maybe slightly contentious. And I'm also thankful to SHRA for moving to residual receipts. That was potentially a deal killer right there. These projects are very hard to get across the finish line. Lowering the AMI means, less income as delineated by Ms. Nichols. So I would like to open the public hearing. I guess there is some public comment. Is that right? We can hear the public comment, and then after I'll close the public hearing and move the item.
All right, that sounds good. Let's hear from the public first. We have a Keith Bloom with a hand up there.
Good afternoon, Council. Keith Bloom with Mutual Housing. I just wanted to express Mutual Housing's support by the City Council for this project, as well as all the support and hard work by City and SHRA staff. And we very much look forward to, as Ann mentioned, breaking ground in early June and bringing this very important project to fruition.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bloom, and thank you for hanging in there with us. Let's see here. I think we have one other hand raised. It's just Chris.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I'd first like to thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm calling in not only for this project, but also for future projects as well. As the council takes these projects into consideration, I'd like you to keep a few things in mind. First and foremost, that the local construction projects matter and the hardworking men and women who build these projects matter. A couple questions that need to be addressed and should be asked on every local project in Sacramento are: first, will there be a commitment to use local hire? Reinvestment back into our community is a must. Also, will the contractor and developer be required to pay the area standards, wages, and benefits on this project and provide health care for the workers? And lastly, will the project be requiring the use of a state-certified apprenticeship program? The use of these programs help reinvest into the education of our next generation. I'm all for, housing projects, but projects with no commitments or contractor requirements just adds to the downward pressure on our community and the workers who build it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Appreciate it. All right, that's it. Councilmember Harris, did you want to close the public hearing and move the item?
Yeah, I do have one question for staff before that. Lachelle, in speaking with Mutual Housing, it sounded like the cost per door on this project is somewhere around $390,000. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's about right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because it's a very important point, and Jay has asked for this in the past, that we be apprised of what these projects cost. This one is certainly much more in the reasonable range than many affordable housing projects. So I'm appreciative of that. With that, I'll close the public hearing and move staff recommendation on the RETEFRA.
All right, there's a motion. Does he have a second?
He does, from Councilmember Jennings.
All right, Councilmember Jennings. Councilmember Valenzuela, did you want to comment on this project as well?
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to respond to the public comment is that I think this is a conversation that we do need to have as a city when it comes to ensuring that our public investments are lifting up the sort of triple bottom line of not just the project itself and the people working on it, but like actually the community, which really comes to those job standards that I believe likely a member of the Carpenters Union just brought up when he gave his public comment. So just want to flag for everybody that I think that's a conversation we need to be having. I know it gets complicated with affordable housing financing and in rules and how we can use that money. So I'm not going to, try to see if we can do that on this project. So we definitely don't want to derail anything, but do think that's a conversation we need to have and just want to let him know that is heard and appreciated. The comments and need for that discussion to take place. Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Guerra.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to, again, follow up on that point that Councilmember Valenzuela brought up, and also ask that if our, in coordination with SHRA and also our lobbying team at the statewide level, I know that there is a significant number of surplus dollars that now have increased above 60 billion at this point. I think for when we're looking at building more housing construction, being able to draw that down so we can also have a commensurate pay for our construction workers, and also providing and ensuring that they have medical benefits and that the contractor is providing the appropriate medical benefits. So if that's also with our team as they're engaging at the statewide level, if they could bring that up as well.
All right, sounds like some good points for Ms. Dozier and her team to take a look at for the future. Any questions there, Ms. Dozier? Are you okay?
No, we're good.
All right, good. Then on this particular item, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Vice Mayor Ashby?
Yes.
Councilmember Laloe?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Yes.
Councilmember Chenier,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Guerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Jennings,
Yes.
Councilmember Vang,
Yes.
and Mayor Steinberg is absent. Motion passes.
All right, thank you so much. We just have one item left here, and it's our discussion calendar. So I guess we'll head on into this, and hopefully the mayor shows up during the presentation. I know this is an item of interest to him. Ms. Dozier, you want to get us started?
Yes, we wanted to combine the requests to come back and really talk about the priorities in a housing workshop. And we thought this would be an opportune time in working in coordination with the city as well as with the city treasurer to put together this presentation that we do each year, which is an annual report out on all of the housing funds that we administer on behalf of the city. So Christine's going to do that presentation and then roll right on into the housing workshop portion of this. And we do have members from the city who are on the line to answer any questions that you may have. I think the treasurer is on as well as some staff from the city manager's office.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Christine.
Good afternoon again. So this is a housing workshop to review affordable housing projects and funding. And I have a PowerPoint, Lachelle, we should turn on. And it serves as SHRA's annual reporting on 3 city ordinances: the Housing Trust Fund Ordinance, the Mixed Income Housing Ordinance, and the Single Room Occupancy Ordinance, and 2 additional affordable housing funding sources administered by SHRA, which are the Permanent Local Housing Allocation and Home Funds for the calendar year 2021. These reports are one of our methods of ensuring transparency regarding funding decisions. So the city of Sacramento has 2 development impact fee programs, one for residential and another for non-residential developments. The revenues generated depend on the level of fee per square foot and for new construction, amount of building that occurs in any given year. The City Housing Trust Fund Ordinance authorizes collections of impact fees on non-residential construction to fund low and very low income housing. And the Housing Trust Fund Ordinance was adopted in 1989. And to date, $38 million has been collected, plus $12 million in repayments from loans previously made by SHRA. In 2021, 1.9 million in fees were collected with 5.5 million in expenditures. You can see those projects on the slide. The Mixed Income Housing Ordinance is an affordable housing impact fee for new housing developments with the goal of increasing the supply of availability for low income workers. $6.2 million has been collected since 2015 when the ordinance was revised to a fee based. In 2021, $695,000 was collected with $510,000 in expenditures.
Vice Mayor, how do you want to do questions? I just have a clarifying question on that.
Sure, you can go ahead and ask your clarifying question.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. On those 2 funds, what is the bottom line? How much are in those 2 funds?
They are in the staff report. And let's see, attachment for the first one. It's in the first attachment. And at the end of the year, at the end of 2021, we had $2.7 million in the City Housing Trust Fund. But, I'm sorry, I should probably be referring to page 3 of your report. That's a better source, my mistake. $1.6 million was available to projects in December 2021. But since then, 1.4 million has been allocated to Mirasol B. That's for the first source. And then
so there's 200,000 left.
And then the second source is on the next attachment, page 3. 1.2 million was left in the City Income Housing Trust Fund at the end of the year. And a similar amount was also allocated to Mirasol B in March.
So that's a net zero.
But I should tell you, the city remits these funds to SHRA quarterly. So I would assume at this point, I didn't check with our finance department before I came in here, but I assume that we've received more funds for the first quarter of this calendar year already.
Okay, it would be great if we could get those numbers when you get them.
Yeah, we will try to do that.
Maybe if there's somebody from the city on the call who could look that up for her, that'd be great.
That would be great because they go directly to our finance department. So,
Understood. Okay.
Thank you.
so this year we have a new funding source to report, Permanent Local Housing Allocation Program, or PLHA. SHRA administers the State of California entitlement grant on behalf of the city, and the PLHA funds are generated through recording fees on real estate transaction. 20% of the funds must be reserved for single family down payment assistance, and the remainder are used for multifamily affordable housing projects. In the beginning, the balance for this is $2.3 million, which was received in 2021 and has been reserved, 20% has been reserved again for single family down payment assistance, and the remaining amount has been committed to Marisol D. SHRA administers federal entitlement grants from HUD on behalf of the city, and the home funds are used again for multifamily housing production and preservation. These funds have hard expenditure deadlines, and it's critical we identify eligible projects so we never have to return funds to the federal government. In 2021, $2.5 million entitlement was provided to SHRA, with another $5.6 million in loan repayments in 2021. There are currently 4 projects under construction utilizing the home funds. And it is great to see the amount of money that has been collected from loans previously made by SHRA. In 2021, the 4 funding sources I just reviewed totaled $7.4 million, with the additional $5.6 million generated from loans SHRA previously made. Loan repayments allow SHRA to reinvest in much needed affordable housing. However, only projects that are able to make loan payments do so. Typically, permanent supportive housing or homeless projects, such as Capitol Park, do not have the ability to make payments, so they are structured at either 0% loans that are due and payable at the term, or structured as residual receipt payments. The single room occupancy ordinance is also reported in this report, staff report. SHRA is required to provide an annual update on the number of residential hotel units downtown, which are withdrawn, or the number of units constructed annually. In 2021, there were no changes in the number of units either withdrawn or added. So lastly, attachment 7 of your report provides 3 sets of information. The first is a list of 12 potential affordable housing developments SHRA has identified. These projects have either applied to SHRA for funding in the past, or the developer has indicated they will be applying in the near future. The list results in 1,119 units with a need of over $94 million in anticipated funding subsidy. This amount is in addition to the tax credits, mortgage revenue bonds, and other leverage resources such as state tax credits. Many of the names on the list will look familiar to council, I'm sure. The second list is 10 potential affordable housing developments or programs identified by city staff. The list includes over 400 units with a need of over $40 million. Together, the list include well over 1,500 units and more than $135 million in local gap financing needed.
So Vice Mayor, I have questions on both of these, but I'm happy to wait until the presentation gets done.
Okay, that sounds good. We have a couple of people queued up too from the audience who'd like that.
Okay, finally, an overview of the City Council's multifamily lending policies adopted in December of 2019. The policies govern all funding outlined in this report. As a reminder, in 2015, the City Council directed the City Auditor to review SHRA's multifamily lending policies. After months of long review, they recommended that SHRA should issue regularly scheduled and advertised funding availability. As a result, and after 2 years of public outreach to stakeholders, SHRA now advertises funding availability 2 to 3 times a year, and funding is prioritized based on the direction provided by City Council. Our first priority is preservation of existing affordable housing at risk of affordability. These are developments which are currently publicly subsidized, but at risk of losing their affordability. In other words, without our involvement, the affordable housing units would be lost. Fortunately, the city of Sacramento does not currently have many at-risk projects, which means the second funding priority has become the focus. So the second funding priority is new construction and conversion of non-residential to residential uses. So within that category of new construction, there is a prioritization of first, permanent supportive housing or homeless developments. Second, workforce developments. Next, veterans, and finally, others such as seniors. It's important to note that the policy state that within each category, applications with a deeper affordability will be given preference. This was very important to many of the affordable housing stakeholders, and we do take this into consideration when evaluating projects for funding. The third is the recapitalization of existing affordable housing developments, which includes substantial rehabilitation. And fourth is the rehabilitation of market rate housing into affordable housing. Again, that involves substantial rehabilitation, results in the conversion of market rate housing to affordable housing. And in this category, we were given direction that preference should be given to those projects on the city of Sacramento's problem property list. Also summarized are criteria used when SHRA underwrites and awards funding. And I'll just go through these quickly, but first is developer capacity and experience. This ensures the development team has the ability to receive tax credits and other funding and has a track record of completing and operating affordable housing. Project readiness, the project can be built as quickly as possible and the property must be in the ownership or control of the applicant with discretionary land uses obtained. Financing plan and eligibility, it demonstrates financially viable projects, including proposed sources and uses, rent, operating subsidies and reserves. The leveraging funds, this is a very important thing we look at. Funds must work in conjunction with other sources to produce the largest number of affordable units. Staff's goal is to ensure the project is well constructed, operated, and maintained with the least amount of local funding as possible. Third, we look at location to ensure affordable housing is not over-concentrated with priority to transit-oriented development and projects and census tracts with lower levels of poverty. And then resident service, community space, and property management is taken into consideration, as is, we just talked about this, local hire, Section 3, and MeBe-WeBe requirements. These are just a few of the criteria SHRA outlines in our 35-page lending priorities and policies. And I'm proud to say that our policies have been used as a model for many other cities and state housing finance agencies over the years. I should also point out, while the funding priorities provide staff, they were provided from the council to staff, means the staff prioritizes, new construction of homeless housing first. However, council always has the ability to approve other affordable projects, as you did in 2021, when you approved funding for the Wong project, and which assisted the rail yards development, and the 4995 Stockton project, which was resulted in an Aggie Square agreement.
All right, thank you, Christine. Is that the end of your presentation?
Almost. 2 more slides, and then I'll turn it over to discussion. Just one thing we wanted to add is that, a question that we are asked all the time is, why does affordable housing cost so much? So to demonstrate that cost, I thought it would be good to highlight 2 of the projects you approved tonight, which were the Wong and the 4995 Stockton. As you can see, when we separate the construction costs out of, which includes the permits, the architectural and engineering fees, the construction costs were, for one was $297,000, the other $370,000 per unit. You might ask why Stockton costs more. It's because there are many more standalone buildings and the units have a larger square footage. The Stockton Boulevard project actually had a lower square footage cost than the Wong. But you can also see that both project total costs are about $100,000 more than construction. Operating rent reserves are one of the main drivers of these additional costs. Since rents are capped, investors and lenders want to make sure that there's 6 months in reserve to cover unforeseen operating issues. These reserves must be capitalized up front and at the time the project is financed, which increases the overall costs. The deeper the affordability, the higher these costs are. And in other words, homeless projects need a greater reserves than the affordable housing development, which can charge higher rents. So that is my last slide, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay.
Michelle and I are available to answer any questions, along with the city treasurer, John Coville, I believe he's on, and we can answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. Councilmember Schneer, we have 4 members of the public signed up to speak. You okay with letting them go first?
Sure.
Okay, let's start with Kendra Lewis from the Sacramento Housing Alliance, who helped us recently get that pro-housing designation and has been an absolute champion for all this. Kendra, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm coming from the Sacramento Housing Alliance to following this report, just to really encourage the council members to see the amount of homes, affordable homes that are going to be needed by 2029, which is about 16,000. And the level currently at 607, it just isn't going to come close. So we're really looking to encourage the city to look at how to get funding for all of these very much needed projects. We really want to urge the city to raise funds to significantly increase the amount of units that can be built now versus later. We know there's a lot going on as it relates to the city projects, but funding affordable housing is a city obligation, and we'd love to see more money invested, which is investing in family economic stability, specifically workers always say they like move closer to jobs if they could have more affordable housing. And so some of the ways we'd like to see the city consider is issue a bond, increase commercial linkage fees, increase funding for housing trust fund, increase transient occupancy tax dedicated to affordable housing, and put general obligation bond for more affordable housing on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, and thank you for bringing your leadership to the conversation. We really appreciate you. All right, then we have Leah Miller.
Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Leah Miller. I'm the President and CEO at Habitat for Humanity of Greater Sacramento. And I'm calling in today just to share concerns that the city has set a minimum need to build over 17,000 new affordable homes by 2029. And last year, however, we only had about 600 units that were built. And if that remains the pace of production, we won't come anywhere close to that goal. And I know that we're all aware of that. Something to share is that in 2021, Habitat received over 7,000 home ownership applications, pre-applications from low-income families in the community for just 12 available homes. And at Habitat, we have the land, we have staff, and we have over 2,000 volunteers at the ready to help build more, but we need funding. Affordable housing developers like Habitat that were included on the list that Christine shared have projects on tap, and we're ready to build if we're able to successfully secure an investment of funding. The affordable housing funding streams included in the packet, such as the Housing Trust Fund and the Mixed Income Housing Ordinance, Home and PLHA, utilize that affordable multifamily financing framework as a guideline to allocating funding. And while Habitat serves the same low-income individuals and builds homes that are all electric and EV ready, supporting zero carbon goals of our region, and at a cost per unit of around $250,000, the affordable single-family housing that Habitat builds doesn't meet the criteria that are currently outlined and therefore wouldn't qualify. You know, given the benefits, I'd like to see Habitat be able to partner with the city using these funding opportunities and more. Habitat affiliates throughout the state and the nation partner with their cities to be able to use those funding streams. So why not do it here? You know, in our past 36 years, we provided opportunities for a place to call home to over 800 low-income Sacramentans with zero interest, affordable mortgages, with zero foreclosures. And so my ask is this: please evaluate the framework guidelines and funding and raise the funding needed to significantly increase the funding needed to provide that greatly needed critical affordable housing in our community. Thank you for your opportunity.
Ms. Miller, thank you for everything you do too for Sacramento. We appreciate you. All right, Sheila, I can't quite pronounce your last name. Are you there with us?
Sorry, I was on mute, but good afternoon, Council. My name is Sheila Sheetrum, and I'm the California Development Director for Volunteers of America National Services. And I just wanted to take time today to speak on our support for SHRA and city funding for affordable housing. And I wanted to speak briefly on our development project, which is going to be located at 1212 Del Paso Boulevard. The land for this project was purchased from the city a few years ago, and we are in the process of putting together various funding applications for this project. We have also been meeting with city officials and are in conversations with Councilman Liloli regarding this project and have submitted a formal request to the city for funding. Similar to the other speakers, our project is very dependent on city funding in order to make it competitive for funding applications. And we believe that this project should be considered a high priority for the city as it aligns with the mayor's housing goals and also has much local business support. The goal for this project is for it to be a sustainable project. It will be all electric and will be almost completely offset by solar. It is also transit oriented as it is located near the light rail, and that'll give future residents access to opportunities throughout the city. There will also be a city library that will be located directly next door. Our goal at our agency is to work to safely house future residents and provide affordable housing in the area. We look forward to working with the city as we continue to proceed with this project development, and just cannot emphasize enough the need for more funding within the area. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, Sheila. Thank you for calling in. All right, our last public speaker on this item is Lambert Davis. Mr. Davis, go ahead.
Hello, yes, I would like to send a shout out to, I hope I pronounce her name correctly, Lachelle Dozier. You know, I've been studying her for years, and she has tremendous integrity when it comes to transparency, accountability, etc. And so did Cassandra Jennings years ago. You know, I'm a native from Sacramento. I study City Hall. I study city politics because I've been voting since I was 19. I'm a baby boomer, so it's hard to trick me. But I wanted to send that shout out to her because she's an example of if you hire and do business with and deal with a lot of black people, you can get that type of result. So it's an outstanding what I'm hearing about the SHRA, but I hear that all the time, but I never take it for granted because you have to have integrity, and she does. I also wanted to welcome back the vice mayor, who was, what I understood, was ill, so welcome back, and thank you.
Thank you, Lambert. And you're right, Michelle Dozier is an absolute superstar. We're lucky to have her. Mayor, welcome back. I'm going to hand it over to you for our colleagues to speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Vice Mayor. I'm sorry that I had another obligation, and I may have to get off the screen again. City business, definitely important city business. But I wanted to thank Michelle and Christine as well for a very good written presentation, and thank Councilmember Schneer for all of his questions as we try to break this down. I sort of want to frame it, even though I know we're now in the middle of the hearing, as I think about this issue. Obviously, we have a tremendous amount of need and not enough resource, not enough money to be able to provide the local match for all the projects that are outstanding. Christine Weikert laid it out a moment ago. I mean, it's the 94 million projects that are, quote, have some form of state or federal funding, and then there's a whole other tranche of projects that don't yet have any of that funding. And so where are we going to get the local match? I think we have to try to answer that question. If not today, then at least over time. I know that when Measure U passed back in 2018, you know, BC, before COVID, we kind of forget, you know, that period of time, there was great anticipation. In fact, the intent of the city council to issue an affordable housing bond. We got right up to the starting line. In fact, the council approved an affordable housing trust framework on January the 20th, 2020, that laid out how we would spend the proceeds of a $100 million trust fund. And then, of course, a month later or so, month and a half later, COVID hit and the world changed. And now we are back in the PC post-COVID era, I hope. Our economy is recovering, and yet there are headwinds, right? Inflation and everything else. And we know that $5 million of debt service a year would have gotten us about $100 million 2 years ago. And that $5 million debt service a year now, given interest rates, will get us less than $70 million a year. And so that is a real problem. And yet, I do want to put a challenge to my city and my colleagues that maybe cannot be answered today, but needs to be answered soon. Measure U is now up to $65 million a year, the second half. I talked and will talk tonight during our budget hearing about how, yes, together we have changed the arc of the city around what is now considered a core priority. We put hundreds of millions of dollars into the inclusive economy, including at least $50 million into one-time funding for an affordable housing trust fund. And that's good. But why can't we make the headroom to do a bond or some sort of permanent funding source down the line here that allows us to have a larger source of local match so that we can run down this list and we can get these projects funded? The need is tremendous. The need is there. And so I don't want to give up on that, even if we cannot get that done right now because of the problematic interest rates and the fact that we just don't get enough for the debt repayment. But then there's a second issue, and it relates to what I call this issue of housing innovation, because I went back and looked at the January 28th, 2020 City Council report, in which the council voted, and I believe unanimously, to say that we were going to set aside at least 30% of the money for low-cost, streamlined, smaller units and a cap on the gap financing provided of $100,000 total public subsidy per unit. And this is where the organization of the city and SHRA comes into play here, because the way that I thought we were at least discussing it, even if we never formally approved it, is that SHRA would appropriately and always be the lead on multifamily housing projects because they are beyond the experts. They do a fantastic job bringing home the projects. And on the city side, of course, we have an Office of Economic Development and Danielle Foster, our housing manager, that was going to be more or less in charge of, call it housing innovation, efficiency housing, and those sorts of products. I think we need to either figure out a way to really, and there is a lot of collaboration, there's nothing negative here, but to really figure out how we incorporate that kind of innovation into the list that Christine Weichert presented a few minutes ago so that we can make decisions. I mean, we made the decision with SHRA, for example, to invest in tiny homes with the Grove. We agreed to an additional $6 million for Capitol Park Hotel a couple of moments ago. I tell you what's next on my list, based upon a bang for the buck. I have a letter here from Lennar Homes. We've been talking to them. Danielle Foster and I and others have been talking to them, my Vang, for now almost 2 years. They are offering to build free of charge 125 units affordable housing project with modular housing, quality, with bathrooms and kitchens. And what they want from us is $2.5 million. That's the amount we have in our current trust fund, or at least the city side of the trust fund. I would like to ask that a resolution be brought back immediately, putting that funding to this project. Because I think it's kind of where Jay Chenier was going a few moments ago, is asking the question, all right, given that we have limited resources, and until we're able to perfect a bond or do something more, how are we going to both finish as many of the projects that already have state or federal funding as we can, at the same time, get more housing for fewer public dollars? And the Lennar project is a great example of where a private developer, major builder, wants to use Sacramento as a demonstration. And I know that we now have a site, which we're not going to announce today because the negotiation on that still is ongoing, but I'd like to see that as a top priority and more low-cost options being brought back. We've gone back and forth on this statewide JPA issue around being able to, the city being able to give up small increments of their property tax over 15 years in order to have a developer to commit to low to moderate income housing. I know it doesn't work in some parts of the city, but it has to work where rents are high. And those are things we ought to grab onto without hesitation because it gives us more stock without having to come up with the $94 million that we frankly don't have. So two things. One is that we cannot give up on finding a permanent funding source. And two, I believe that we have to make sure that on our list provided by SHRA, the city's economic development department, the city treasurer, the city manager, all of us together, that we are not passing over those projects which will get us, in this case with Lennar, 125 units for $2.5 million. That's what I wanted to say to start. So thank you. Who is next? Councilman Chenier?
Thank you, Mayor. You took most of what I was going to say.
No, I thought you had already talked about this. I'm sorry.
No problem at all.
I came on late. I apologize.
I'm here to support everything you said. Part of when I asked for this workshop, one of the items was around selling a bond. And unfortunately, the economy really doesn't make that a worthwhile endeavor at this point. I've certainly been convinced if we sold bonds now for the $5 million a year debt service, we'd get $67 million. If we put 3 years of debt service aside, we're down to $52 million, and it's really not worth it at that point, I think. But I agree with you, Mayor. I don't think that we should give up on this at all. Couple of comments that are somewhat logistical in nature, I think. One is I'd like to make sure, and I have this in my memo around the request that I made back in March, which is that we do this twice a year and get a listing of the properties and projects so that we can stay up to it, and that when money does arrive from one way or another, and we know, Mayor, you're pretty good at making that happen, we have our priorities set. So I think that's really important. I also want to refer to the charts, and Lachelle and Christine, thank you for the work you've done on this. And it's a little bit of a deja vu conversation because we had it the other day. But I do think it's really important that we prioritize these projects. Now we have the criteria, but really understanding when we have dollars, what the most cost-efficient, effective project is at any one time is important. And it's important that we have that ready so that we can move quickly on it. I think that the data point that is missing here, and I understand that there's pieces of the puzzle to it, but is the cost per unit. That has to be something that we really integrate into our thinking when we are looking at how to spend our dollars. And I understand that different AMIs may affect the cost per unit, and if we want to go into a lower AMI, it will cost us more. I understand that, but I think that's information we need. So my request on this, and I hope the council will support, is that when we do this twice a year and we break down these lists of potential projects, a cost per unit number is in there. It would also be beneficial to understand where the potential dollars are or what types of funds. We know that the color of money is different. Some funds can be used for some types of projects, some funds for others. So what that looks like. And just to go back on the cost per unit, that there's two ways to look at that, right? One is overall, what's the cost per unit? And then what's the subsidy per unit? So needing to know both of those, I think is going to be really important. We definitely want to use the city's affordable housing framework to prioritize city projects. Again, I want us to always be ready, shovel ready, if you will, so that when funds come down, and my hope is that with the state surplus that Mr. Guerra was referring to, that some of those extra billions of dollars go into housing projects, and we'll be able to build some of these. The other piece here is, how can the city and SHRA, and this is a question I think that the mayor was asking, how can we better support entities like Habitat, entities that are doing innovative things? We know that the cost per unit is somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 per unit. We have to figure out how to do that more effectively. We need to stretch our dollars, and I know that there are things going on that can help that. I want to talk and support the mayor on the VIV project. I mean, there's a great case there where we're partnering with a builder who wants to make this a model, and it will cost the city $20,000 to $25,000 per unit, per door. We can't beat the cost, 125 units. It's a good site. I know we're not identifying the site, but I will say that it's a TOD site. And we should be moving forward on that as quickly as possible. So I want to support the mayor's request that we bring a resolution, hopefully next week, if that's possible. I believe we have $4.93 million left in the Housing Trust Fund. To use 2.5 of that for 125 units to be is a very good expenditure of our funds. So with that, I will stop. But again, really looking for innovation and creativity as we move forward. It's the only way that we're going to come close to meeting the needs of our residents around affordable housing. Thank you.
Mayor, are you still with us?
I think you're back, Vice Mayor.
I think you're right. All right. Well, let's keep plugging along here. Mayor Pro Tem Guerra?
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Mayor here. A couple of thoughts here on, yes, I do want to also support the efficiency housing aspect. We did do a unique project with St. John's where we used manufactured homes, and it fit in that particular location. And so I think there's unique ways to do that already. We've learned a lot with that project, and then also the Weave project. I do want to talk a little bit about the cost per housing issue. I want to make sure that we don't get sidetracked just by the absolute bottom line here, because one of the things I wanted to make sure that is in our multifamily housing priorities is that it also matched with our economic development strategy too, which is infilling and looking at projects in areas that haven't been invested a lot. Some of our commercial corridors where we have vacant land where we can actually build upon there. And many of those sites, they're going to be more expensive. One, because they don't have the infrastructure that other areas may have, and two, there may be some cleanup involved because they were old dry cleaners or gas stations and sort, which is why they've been vacant for a long time. So I want to make sure that we also take into account what the cost implications are. The John's Furniture site is a good example. I mean, that's one where it wasn't a blank canvas. Like, there was already a lot of work already there that needed to be done for that area. The other piece I want to make sure, which can and sometimes will affect the cost, is ensuring that when we're selecting our contractors, that they are also we're doing whatever we can to make sure that they're compliant in providing the wages. And many of these projects, particularly if they're federally funded, they're going to pay prevailing wage and address the issues of healthcare and apprenticeship programs. But we don't have any pre-qual specific requirements other than that. And what concerns me is recent situations where in some cases the workers were being undercut out of their wages and had gone to court and whatnot. So if there are ways to get ahead of that, to find out, to make sure that they're meeting the appropriate pre-qualification requirements so that our early screening process is finding our best contractors. We want to make sure that that happens. So when we're talking about the multifamily housing guidelines, I'd like to see on that aspect of it. So both on how we select those who we work with, and then second, the locations. I would hate to see that our guidelines change to the point where all we look is just at the bottom line, and then we won't see development in areas like Franklin Boulevard, Stockton Boulevard, where we desperately need more housing. There's a lot of demand there where families are right now. The rising cost of housing there is pushing not just those in the extremely low income, but in the 80% AMI, 70% AMI, who have lived there for generations. So on a couple of those fronts, when we're looking at our multifamily housing guidelines, I'd like to make sure that they also match with our priorities of infill development on our commercial corridors, where we already are trying to improve the public transit system there, and we already have some of those pieces that are essential for families that are looking to get to work. So let me stop there. The other let me just stop there for right now. I wanted to make sure that we highlighted those two pieces because there was a concern at some point that maybe we couldn't get the John's Furniture site moving forward, and we still have the San Juan site, which my understanding is there's still a funding gap. Is that correct, Lachelle, for the San Juan site?
We're working on that. Since the majority is on the county side, they are really moving aggressively forward. So I think there's a path forward.
Very good, very good. But it's been one that for many years we've been trying every way to crack that nut. We're getting closer, but again, another site where the cost is a little higher. I think we shaved off a little bit off the edge by looking at how we do the utility hookups a little differently, and even then looking at the number of locations. I hope we don't jeopardize the need for a child care center there as well. I mean, those are essential parts that we want to deal with. So while we have to definitely, I think maybe the way that Councilmember Chenier is breaking up is look at the subsidy, look at the overall cost. But there are those factors that if we want to build in areas where we need to build, it may be more expensive than just the bottom line. So to that point, I'll stop there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Valenzuela, you are the last hand raised for the council.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, SHRA team, for that informative presentation. My colleague, Mayor Pro Tem, beat me a little bit to the pre-qual language discussion, but I know it's a delicate balance between trying to get as many doors built as we can, but we also don't want to undercut people who are trying to do well by their workers, and so definitely want to lift up that as something in support, and also supporting Councilmember Chenier in his request for more details on some of these projects. I think cost per door, subsidy per door is really great language. Would also love to see like level of affordability, year built. I think this is information that you all have in different places that it would be cool to see that kind of together, because just seeing number of doors out of context with dollars doesn't quite give me the information to understand. And I actually thought that last slide where you had those examples, Christine, of a couple of projects and how they were different and why they were different kind of also gets to some of these questions, right? The Wong Center didn't have to worry about buying the land. And so its cost went significantly down because they had the land donated to them. And so I think it will also help us start to understand when we see these differences in price per door, where that might be coming from, like Capitol Park Hotel, like we talked about a couple of meetings ago, very expensive, but also super historic building, taking a ton of work. Every time you take away a layer, you discover something new, and preserving that is part of what this additional cost comes from, which is the policy decision this council has made to invest in. So I would love to see more of that data published. Either maybe we have a website. I don't know if we have a website where these reports live, but maybe that's someplace we can put these to live, or something you could send out to council. I also want to pick up on the conversation because I think our city treasurer, and I want to thank him for the analysis that he provided through the consultant to us about the idea of a bond, which was something that I understand why we can't move forward right then, but I don't want to move past too quickly one of the conclusions that the consultant raised to us, because one of the things the consultant noted that I think is really important is that we haven't changed the level of these fees in quite some time. Some of them adjust annually automatically, but in some cases, I think we have a lot to look at when it comes to the level of these fees. For example, mixed income housing ordinance adopted in 2015 to replace the previous ordinance that we call inclusionary zoning, but it only generated just over $6 million since we made that change. And we all know that that's barely enough to cover one, maybe two affordable housing projects in years. And that's not going to be enough. And it's in line with the fact that at the time that fee was adopted, I think the level that was set was about a third, if I remember correctly, of what SHRA was recommending in 2015. And so those dollars have changed significantly in 2022. And we know those costs have only gone up. The other example with the Housing Trust Fund, which is trying to build more housing near jobs, which is something that is really important, $2.7 million in a year. That might cover a project if we're really lucky and if they've gotten a bunch of other funding that we're trying to leverage in, but that's not enough to even really fund one project in an entire year. So I think we can debate a lot of policy merits here, but in the end, I know that the city staff is working right now on a study. Not quite a full nexus study. And I don't know if Tom Pace is on the call to able to talk about what the parameters of that study are, but we really need to look at this level of fee and really need to start thinking about whether the level of those fees is appropriate for the need and the cost of building that we're seeing in our community. And before anybody starts with, oh, what if we increase the fee, we're going to stop building? I have been asking this question of developers across town, and I have not gotten one example of a city that has adopted stronger protections for affordable housing or stronger requirements, either for a fee or building units, that has seen development slow down or stop. I have never seen evidence of that. And if there is evidence of that, I would love to know, because right now, all I see is a policy argument that's really based on ideals that are informed by folks who may or may not have different profit incentives. And I want us to have that information so that we can actually decide as a city, because this fee is not close. I hope we can all agree, if nothing else, if we disagree on the path forward, we can all agree that a couple $1 million a year in a fee is not even close to subsidizing the level of need that we are seeing in our community and the level of housing that we're going to need to build, not just for the current need of people who are housed, but as was mentioned, the folks who are on the street, people who get onto the street, people who get off the street. You may remember when we were doing the comprehensive siding plan, we had someone call in from St. John's Women's Shelter, and she said, look, I've been here for 9 months, I think is what she said. And she has a job, she's gotten on track, she's finished the program, and she can't leave because she can't find any place to live that she can afford with the income that she's making. And if you think about the number of folks who end up on the street because they find a bad situation, I'm thinking about the seniors on Bannon Island who all have income and can't find any place to live on that income. And the people who get into our shelter system, who get help, who get on the right track, who are stuck there. And this is part of why we need to increase our triage shelters so much, is because we have shelters, we have services, they're just all full. And so if we're going to talk about a big part of the solution that we need to the crisis in our community, it has to be providing more affordable housing and supportive housing for people who are going to need it. And this level of funding simply isn't going to do it. And I support the effort for efficiency. I think it's important, the questions that my colleagues asked, what could we be doing? How do we diagnose? How do we make it easier and more affordable to build more doors as quickly as we can? But in the end, I don't know if we get around the question of raising these fees or finding some other mechanism, because I keep telling folks who say, oh my gosh, you can't raise the fee, you're going to stop development. Give me another option. I would love another option, because right now I'm seeing us on a trajectory that's going to put us further and further and further into the hole on affordable units, unless we really have that conversation about raising these fees. So I just want to flag that. And I don't know, Tom, if you're on the call, if you want to raise
Just
about
really
the
quick
study you're
before
working on. But
before we go to Tom, I appreciate the
okay,
passion, and she's right. This is the issue of the year. We'll definitely need to be taking on over the next several months. But I will just remind my colleagues quickly that we have a closed session at 4:00 and a very lengthy 5:00 agenda tonight too. And Councilmember Chenier has raised his hand again and has another comment. And I believe the mayor has also rejoined us. So I'm not sure where we want to go exactly from here. Mayor, would you you want to take back over? Or you want me to finish this section? What would you like to do?
Oh, Councilmember Chenier, and I think this is not an action item.
It is not.
Discussion item. And if I could just finish then my last sentence, if that's okay, Vice Mayor. Okay, then, if, I mean, in lieu of having Tom speak about the study, because it's in the housing element report that we'll see at our next meeting, I want to say that we're kind of trying to problem solve around something that I think has at least part of the solution to me is super obvious. And so I thank you. Glad staff is working on that study, and I believe it's going to commence, if it hasn't already, any day now. And I hope we are open and start thinking about that with some urgency later this year, so that next year's report looks a little bit different. Thank you.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I'll be very
really quick, Councilmember Chenier, let me just answer Councilmember Valenzuela. Because this is an SHRA meeting, Tom can attend, so I've been sent by city staff. All right, go ahead, Councilmember Chenier, and then we'll.
Yeah, just really quickly, and I think the mayor said this, and if I didn't, I want to make sure that it's said, is that I think we need to use the city housing framework when we're spending city dollars. So I want to make sure that that's on the table. And then also, if Leah is still here from Habitat, I just want to say thank you for Rock the Block over the weekend. You guys did a great job. They had hundreds of volunteers and did wonderful for the community of Oak Park. So thank you, Leah.
Mayor, my suggestion to you is potentially, maybe this fall you might want to host an off-site housing meeting where you bring together SHRA staff and city staff to discuss some of these things, because you're hearing some city issues that are not SHRA's issue and some SHRA issues that kind of don't transfer over to the city. So there might be a need for a broader conversation there. And so it's a good hearing, even though it's not on for a vote today, it's just discussion. Ms. Dozier, thank you so much for all that you do. Mayor, I'll give this back to you, but that should be the end of the meeting, and then we reconvene at 4 o'clock for closed session.
Okay, thank you so much, Vice Mayor, for taking the helm here for me. Appreciate it. Thank you to all of our housing leaders and professionals here at the staff level. Really, we're so lucky to have all of you. And the passionate advocacy community. We need more resources. We need more innovation. We need more collaboration. And that's what we will seek to do. I would like to work with the city manager, SHRA, if appropriate. I can put something on the agenda as well. I would like to get that $2.5 million teed up in response to the very generous offer from Lennar. That is a proverbial bird in the hand here. And I think Vice Mayor is right. I think we need to convene some more workshops, whether they be city council workshops or maybe some informal discussions among all of our team here, internally and externally, and probably before the fall. I think we need to do that sooner or later, and we'll seek to do that, okay? Thank you, everybody. Are we adjourned?
So, Mayor, we do have public comments for matters not on the agenda.
Oh, let's go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I have one hand raised, phone number 4366. Mr. Davis?
Yes, I would like to end what I call a very inspirational meeting. I heard some very good things, true leadership, Mayor, and some of you that have commented tonight about what was on the agenda. I did want to end on a very positive note that this weekend was Mother's Day weekend, and something that's not amazing to me, but it might be to you, but the cheesecakes went viral throughout every district. I mean, I have people, millennials mainly, who have told me this. I'm a baby boomer. I don't really understand viral, but I understand cheesecakes. And so that's what they told me. And then during our family meeting this weekend, we were notified, which I knew anyway, that my parents moved to Sacramento 76 years ago this year, 1946. And so whenever I hear housing, I think of what did they have to endure. 76 years, I guarantee, is older than anybody on that rostrum, including me. And it dawned on me that they demonstrated integrity. And, when you think about 76 years ago in Sacramento, redlining, all of the things that I'm hearing, it motivates me to move forward because it was our mother's cheesecakes that has everybody excited. So hopefully we'll receive some funding because it's now been confirmed that we may be the only Black-owned cheesecake business in Sacramento, specifically from Del Paso Heights. And when you talk about diversity, exclusivity, inclusion, and those sort of things, you're talking to somebody who is standing on the shoulders.
Thank you for your
of
comments. Your
two
time is complete. Will you make your final comment, please?
76 years ago, Mayor. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no more speakers.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. Again, if there's nothing come before the Housing Authority and the City Council, we'll recess closed session at 4 o'clock, council session at 5 o'clock. Thank you all very much.